Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get into it. Mike and Natalie video. Sarah says, even though our divorce is almost finalized in my own life, I still remember our courtship. So in the Mike and Natalie video last week, I was talking about one of the John Gottman findings over decades of research was that when you ask people, couples, to recall the beginning of their relationship, if they have a positive association with those early years or months, then that is more indicative of a relationship surviving into the future. Whereas if people look back at the beginning of their relationship and they have a negative association, or they can't remember the positive associations, and that is more indicative of a relationship breaking up. So Sarah says, even though our divorce is almost finalized, I still remember our courtship, wedding, and early days with great fondness. I really hoped that having read so much of Gottman's work before I got married would somehow protect me from getting divorced. I think all it did was make me more aware of just how our marriage was completely deteriorating. 5 years and 6 therapists later, sometimes things just don't work out. But those early days were lovely days. Yes. And I'm sorry you're going through that, Sarah. Sounds like a difficult situation, but it also sounds like you worked really hard. You tried to have a lot of self-awareness, and you're looking back with some positivity. So, sometimes relationships don't work out. We have a lot of stigma around divorce, failed marriages, broken families, and it's really based on early traditional ideas about what was right or good in life, maybe religion, I don't know. But sometimes a relationship ends. Most of our relationships end. If you count all of our romantic relationships throughout our life, particularly if you dated a lot when you were younger, then 90%, 95, 99% of our relationships don't last the rest of our life. So are we failing 99% of the time? Or do some relationships just run its course? Do some relationships start well but don't really sustain themselves very well? It's totally fine. We have a tremendous amount of stigma around it, and it's really silly. Sincerely, Sierra says, hey, Dr. Kirk, I just paused 90 Day Fiance, A Single Life on TV to come and comment and tell you that there's a place for you to explain episode 2 with Muhammad apologizing. Okay, I don't know who Muhammad is, but I will check that out. Brandon and Julia videos, Nunya says, caring or considering your partner's wants and needs is not being submissive. If anything, I think Brandon has not been submissive to Julia and has often disregarded and been inconsiderate of her wants, needs, and concerns. Interesting. Anna says, it is so interesting to see the parents' reactions of, Brandon's parents, reactions and how they speak differently when they are alone on the camera. They seem to be holding so much back when Julia is around. I wonder if they are just really scared that she will take Brandon away from them. Interesting. Anna also says, thank you, Dr. Kirk, for always taking the time to describe, explain, and model healthy masculinity. It is so incredibly refreshing to see, hear, and feel on a public platform. It can feel so frustrating at times to be the only one screaming in the wind and everyone else thinks you're mad or just weird, or if they're listening at all, it's exhausting. Much love from Ireland. Yes, agreed, Anna. I'm with you on that. I feel like I'm screaming into the wind as well with regards to all sorts of things, including the differences between toxic and positive masculinity. Angela and Michael video. Some anonymous patron emailed in and said, I was watching your latest episode on Angela and Michael, and honestly, it made me cry because it's something I'm currently going through. I was cheated on multiple times, lied to so in that video, I was talking about the trauma of being cheated on. Anonymous patron, because it's something I'm currently going through. I was cheated on multiple times, lied to for a year, lied to about how often the cheating happened after I found out. And when Michael confessed, Angela and Michael confessed that he lied about how he cheated, I was taken back to when I found out, and it didn't feel great to me. Hearing you talk about the trauma and distrust it causes really got to me because I felt like you were speaking directly to me. My partner and I have been struggling to find a good therapist to get through this. We're hoping the next one will feel right. To be honest, during my sessions with the couples therapist, I often think, I don't think Kirk would have said it like that, LOL. Anyway, I keep in mind what you say about how finding the right therapist for you can take a while, so I'm holding out hope for that. Yeah, anonymous patron, I'm glad that you're doing that. And, it takes time. And for you couples therapists out there, become educated on infidelity recovery and really just good couples therapy in general. Couples therapy is extremely complicated, and it is very difficult to do. You have to incorporate not only research and science and evidence-based practices, but you also have to integrate wisdom and humanness and attachment and understanding how people feel about how people live, compatibility, because you can write about trust and you can feel trust. Like the thing that I tell my students is a good portion of my knowledge base and wisdom and clinical judgment in couples therapy comes from my own relationships that I've been in, my own romantic relationships that I've been in. It's one thing to read about conflict or to see it happening. It's another thing to be in the middle of it yourself. You're having a massive conflict or some kind of a moderate conflict with your spouse, and you're having all those feelings and all that anger and all those weird thoughts that go through your mind at that time. And that's particular. I mean, it's intense. And so but yeah, absolutely find the right one. Take the time to find the right therapist. The idea that the very first therapist you happen to come across is the right one for you is a bit of a long shot. Chika says, in Nigeria, being called an elder, so, in this episode, Angela and Michael was saying that she was his elder, and Angela got upset because she was saying, "What do you call me, old?" So Chika says, in Nigeria, being called an elder is a sign of honor and respect. We are a culture based on hierarchy, so that's why he doesn't understand why Angela is offended. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're old, just older than the person who calls you an elder, who calls you, and therefore deserving of more authority and respect. Nigerians even call their older siblings their elders. I don't know if that makes sense to Americans. This is why it's important to understand cultural differences before engagements in marriage. You're bound to run into situations like this. Yes, absolutely. It's important to understand cultural differences. And it's interesting that they don't have a conversation around that Michael doesn't say to Angela, no. When I call you an elder, I'm not calling you like a grandma. I'm just saying you're older than me. And in my culture, in contrast with American culture, we have a very hierarchical society. And people that are even just a year or two older than me are my elders, and I'm supposed to show them respect. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you're like my mom or something, even though she is old enough to be his mom, I believe. Anyway, Rachel says, this may be hard to understand if you aren't aware of African culture. This is my perspective as a West African person. It is considered rude to communicate your feelings to a person who is older than you. This is because of the idea that older people are seen as wiser and more knowledgeable from their life experience. So you just have to apologize and accept the elder's actions. So that is interesting, Rachel. Thank you very much. I always appreciate these kinds of comments on YouTube explaining different cultural ideas. Very, very helpful, especially on a show like 90 Day Fiance. So what Rachel is saying is that Michael is younger than Angela, and the hierarchical structure of the society is such that when you're being yelled at by someone that's older than you, you can't talk back. You're not supposed to engage in a peer-to-peer conversation. You're supposed to say you're sorry and you'll do better next time, even though you're not a child. In American society, if you're 10 years old, you're supposed to listen to your parents. You're supposed to listen to your teachers. Maybe not as much as the rest of the world, but at least some of that respect is expected. But once you're an adult, and particularly if you're in a romantic relationship, regardless of the age difference, our culture says you don't need to give that older person respect at all. Once you've crossed a line, everyone deserves the same respect, at least on paper anyway. And so they're saying in West African culture and Nigerian culture, it's really quite different than that. And they're having a culture clash around that. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that. I didn't know about that. Call Me Chi says, to chime in as a person from a Nigerian family, the word elder is just the word we use. My cousin is only a year older than me, but my family will refer to her as my elder. That's very interesting. Catherine says, I like the point that we can have compassion for someone like Angela in her situation. However, I fully appreciate letting it be known that it is not okay to assault or go after people just because we are feeling hurt. Compassion is good for people like Angela, but having it should not be an excuse to let people behave poorly. Agreed, Catherine. Yeah, there's this interesting dichotomy that I feel, and I think a lot of people are feeling it too with Angela, because she can be very vulnerable and likable, especially as she goes through difficult, periods of her life. And we feel for her. So there's this weird feeling and this is actually based on a stereotype and a bias that we have against quote unquote abusers. And I see this happening a lot online, where someone is identified as someone who might be abusive or is actually abusive. And we instantly categorize this person as a evil human being, and we dehumanize them. We just say they're different. They're a psychopath. They're a malignant narcissist. They're over there. We are over here, and they are over there. And that can be a useful way of looking at it. And some people surely are malignant narcissists, and some people surely are psychopaths. I don't know if we need to necessarily categorize them as evil or different, but there are certain people who are different. But most of the people that people are describing online are not true psychopaths, or there's no evidence online to provide that diagnosis. But we often will do that. And then with Angela, there's, I think, an impulse to do that with her, given some of her behaviors, but then she's human as well. We're like, well, how do we match those two things up? I feel like Angela is human and vulnerable, and I feel bad for her. I feel sad for her. I can connect with her on a certain level, but she does these horrible things. What do I do with this? Well, that's true for most people who are quote unquote abusive. All the clients that I have treated who were abusers, whether it was a legal criminal act that they were convicted of and forced to go to therapy, or I just identify their behavior as abusive and we as a family say, yes, that is abusive. The people are very likable human beings. They have vulnerability, and that's usually where the abuse comes from. And so with Angela, maybe it's good that she has those two sides, because it helps us to realize that not only are abusive people humans too, but regular, likable humans can be abusive. Angel says, COVID silver linings are few and far between, but the tell-all couches being further apart seems like a really good development. Yes, Angel, I hadn't thought about that, especially when it comes to Angela, right? She needs a little bit more space for altercations to reduce the risk of it happening. All right, Colt and Jess and Larissa videos from last week. We are approaching the end pretty soon. By the way, I'll skip down to another comment. Courtney said, seeing Michelle, my cat, makes my heart ache for you every time, Dr. Honda Heart. I hope you're doing okay. I'm glad in a way you have so many recordings of her being adorable and saying all the important things she had to say. Yeah. So I recorded the Colt videos a while ago. Stacy, my wife, she schedules all these out. And so she only sneaks those in times when we have time to post them, because there's the new shows coming out all the time. And so there's gonna be a few weeks, maybe months even, of potential Michelle sightings, even though she has moved on to the other plane of existence. And that must be hard to watch. I'm really sad that she's gone, and I know a lot of you are as well. And by the way, I want to make an announcement that we had swag. On the last video, I think I had the T-shirt, My Cat Wants to Chime In, with a painting that my wife made of Michelle. And we said that all the proceeds of the sale of that merch was going to go to a charity called Animals Lebanon, which is an organization that saves animals, pets, from the streets of Lebanon, I think Beirut, and brings them to loving homes, I think a lot of them in the United States. And that's where I got Michelle from. She was on the streets of Beirut, Lebanon. Animals Lebanon volunteers or workers rescued her, hand carried her onto a plane into the United States, and ended up in the pet finder system, and then I ended up getting Michelle. And so with Michelle's passing, we had this swag. We had actually, Stacy had been working on that swag for months prior to Michelle's health going down. So it kind of just strangely coincided. And so when we unveiled the merch, we decided to give all the proceeds. And we raised, in the past, I don't know, week or two, $600 or almost 600, but I just rounded up. And we donated that to animalslebanon.org. So also, if you want to buy more of that swag, that'd be great. My cat wants to chime in. You can get a mug or a sticker or something. I think it's a really great shirt. A lot of people just consider it a shirt you would just buy anyway, because maybe you have a cat that likes to chime in sometimes. Also, if you just want to donate directly to animalslebanon.org, that would be great. I think it feels good to give to organizations like that. I've said this before, but when the big explosion happened last year in Beirut, their building was actually close enough to the explosion that glass shards went flying into the office where a lot of the animals were, and the glass harmed a lot of the animals, tragically. And so they needed to pay bills for medical attention for a lot of the animals. And so anyway, but yeah, for the next few weeks, months, I don't know, there's going to be some videos that I recorded prior to Michelle passing where she will be with me. And it's sort of like when you get a voicemail from someone that passed away, or you didn't know you had a voicemail, or an email that gets, I don't know, there's just things that happen after people die, and you get a message from them and you're like, wait, what? Because your brain wants them to be alive still. When I walk into my office where Michelle would often be, sometimes I will see her. I'll just see her. I think I had a dream about her last night, actually, too, which is another common grief processing thing. But anyway, so Courtney pointed that out, and thank you. Shybik says about Colt and Larissa and Jess, wow, this is the first time I felt that Larissa has shown her real self. Most of the time on the show, Larissa felt like a character rather than a real person. Interesting. Jamie says, it would be interesting to hear more discussion about how the lack of sexual experience can be very stigmatized, especially in American society. It's such a sensitive subject and doesn't have to be a source of shame as it is for so many people. Yes, agree, Jamie. It's really ridiculous. We have this, I don't know what is going on in our society when it comes to sex. We're so broken and backward and childish when it comes to sexuality. On one hand, if you have sex a lot, you're a slut and you're bad. On the other hand, if you've never had sex at all, you're a mama's boy, or you're gross, or you're, I don't know, if you're a man, then you're emasculated, you're not a real man, this kind of thing. It's just sex, people. It's fine. If you want to have it, have it. If you don't. It's just a thing, like a massage or like a good meal or something. It's fine. Now, it can have meaning, like a massage can have meaning, and a good meal can have meaning. And it can be a wonderful way for people to bond, and it can be a wonderful, pleasurable experience, and it can provide a lot of even spiritual aspects to it, but it doesn't have to. But all the dumb associations that we have with how many people have you been with? But yeah, anyway, I don't know what the commenter is commenting on, because it's been a while since I recorded that video, but I wonder, were people making fun of Colt because he hasn't had that much sex or something? I'm not sure. But yeah, we need to stop all that kind of nonsense. Red says, thank you for addressing the issue of how Colt followed Jess into the hall elevator and the street, trying to block her path and manipulate her into calming down. It also seems as if calming her down was to make himself feel at ease and not to help her. As someone who has had multiple abusive relationships, his actions rang home true to me. Yes, Red. So his behavior was, we could categorize it as abusive. If someone wants to leave, well, they were both abusive to each other in that moment, if I remember right. Jess actually threw something at him. So there were things going both ways. However, Colt is a much bigger person. He has a much more intimidating presence, and thus is more responsible for monitoring his behavior. So anyway, yeah, it's always upsetting to watch that kind of thing, because it's one thing to watch reality TV and react to it and just have like a few things to say about it. It's another thing to literally be watching people abuse each other and potentially traumatize each other. It's really hard to watch for me. KD says, Dr. Kirk, I wish you would have elaborated a bit more on why it is a bad idea to follow, use your body to push and block, grab at, etc., someone trying to leave a situation like this. I think a lot of people who do that kind of behavior don't understand the impact it has on the victim. Yeah, I can't remember how much I went into it, but absolutely, it is completely traumatic to people for the most part. I've had that happen to me where people were blocking my ability, even though I was bigger than the person, and if push came to shove, literally, I could have won the fight. I'm quite positive. But there's something terrifying about someone going to those lengths, because if they're going to do that, what else are they going to do? If they feel as though they have the right to get in your way, then what else do they feel like they have the right to? It's incredibly frightening. It is. It really is. And that sort of thing has to stop. And this actually happens in common conflicts with couples, is, a heated conversation and one person's just like, I need a break, screw this noise, and they want to leave the room. It's not uncommon for someone to bar the door or to grab someone, this sort of thing. Not okay, people. If someone wants to leave the room, they have the right. People have the right to their bodies and the integrity thereof, and they have the right to the integrity of their exit and to move their bodies where they want to move, as long as it's not harming other people, particularly if you're in a massive fight and they want to get away. That's okay, unless there's some life or death ish reason as to why they can't leave, like you're driving down the road and they just want to jump out of the car or something, you're trying to help them out. I don't know. But most of the time, it is not okay to prevent someone from leaving. It is considered abuse for good reason. Yendrick says, please, 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 Dr. Honda, react to Colt on 90 Day The Single Life. You get so much insight into Colt and Big Ed as well. Well, for you, Yendrick, I will do it. So look out for that. Demi Lovato, Girlbot, says, I'm scared that Demi is surrounded by yes people. Yeah. Monica says, addiction is a lifelong battle, and she's skating on really thin ice with the way she's approaching recovery here. The fact that her mom is so confident in her sobriety is really troubling. And with her former assistant saying she knows her limits, that could not be farther from the truth. Her team is not helping her. Yeah, agreed. I hadn't thought about it until I had some time, but the people who are around her have reasons to go along with it, right? On one hand, it's not uncommon for people to go along with it because they don't know what recovery is supposed to look like. And it's easy to be convinced by the addict who is walking on thin ice or dancing with the devil, if you will. But they also have an incentive to go along with it because, as I think I say in the video, if she did everything that she should be doing to attain sobriety, she probably shouldn't be touring. She probably shouldn't be recording. She probably shouldn't be using Instagram. She probably shouldn't be doing anything that will trigger her. And a lot of that has to do with being on the road and performing and trying to look good all the time and having people online attack you. If she were to really make a very concerted effort to become sober, it would probably entail her completely pulling away from public life for, 3 to 5 years or something. And so everyone around her will lose either money or the goodies of being with someone who's really famous, but obviously money, a big part of it. Also, Demi has a lot of power. She is a powerful person with a lot of money, and a lot of people want to be her friends. And if you're in her inner circle, that you could feel really quite special about that. And to go against her, you might feel like you're risking that you're going to be ostracized and you're not going to be friends with a super famous person. Now, I'm not accusing anyone in her life of being that sort of way. I have no idea. But, those are factors that might be at play. And yeah, that's not helping her. Now, I can't diagnose from afar. I don't know. But from what we saw in the video, and I'll say it again, and I've said this about people in my personal life, I've said it about clients, so there are two types of stories that I will hear. one in which I'm concerned and one of which I'm not very concerned about the risk. Demi provides us definitely in the category of concerning. And I always say that I always use this in my head because it's easy to be seduced by someone's, reassurance, right? Demi seems pretty convinced, and it feels convincing on a certain level. And I've been with people in my personal life who have exhibited that very convincing talk, like I've got it under control. I'm just smoking weed every now and then. It's not a big deal. It's okay. And the thing I'm always looking for, that I always say in my mind, and I tell people around me, is until this person is going to AA or NA meetings or some other treatment on a daily basis or close to daily basis, like 5 times a week, then we are not out of the woods. We're not necessarily out of the woods if they're going to meetings every day, but the people that I've seen that actually get better and recover are people that go to meetings every day, especially in the beginning. You talk to anyone who has had long-term sobriety, 99% of the time, they will talk about AA, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, or Narcotics Anonymous meetings, or some other meetings that have a similar format. They will talk about how that was at least 51% of the reason why they were able to recover and attain sobriety. It's not the only thing, and it's not a cure-all. It's not like going to meetings is necessarily going to solve your problems. It doesn't. But it definitely is a major component of the ongoing effort of sobriety. You might be able to achieve relative sobriety in the short term, but to sustain it for 5, 10, 25 years, I've never seen anyone do it without meetings being a significant part. And it's not just going to the meetings. It's talking. It's having friends. It's having sponsors. It's sponsoring other people. It's having other sober people to hang out with. It's the ceremonies and the coins and the whole, all the stuff. So with Demi, we're not seeing that, right? All we're hearing in terms of her treatment is she has a therapist of which we know nothing about what style of therapy it is or what they're working on. And she has a case manager, which I still don't, that he was on the document. I still don't even know what that really is or what that means. So from the looks of it, he is kind of like a therapist. But anyway, given her level of addiction, given her level of risk, given her problem, given the type of issue she has, anything short of constant recovery work daily, a constant regimen of trigger management, boredom management, just all the things that you do when you involve yourself in 24/7 recovery, which you need to do in the first 3 to 6 months at least. Anything short of that means she's still basically in the woods. And although she, in the interviews, says she's not using hard drugs, she's still using marijuana and alcohol, which means that, there's a chance that, she's just, it's like, so one of the types of people who struggled with addiction that I would see, we called them polysubstance addicts, meaning that they weren't necessarily drilled or laser focused on a drug of choice like cocaine or alcohol. They seemed to just want anything. And I'll never forget this one client I had. He was one of these polysubstance substance abuse addicts, and he was sober, but he was transferring all of his energy away from other substances to caffeine. And so caffeine was like his obsession. And I remember him talking about how he was like, yeah, I'm getting really into caffeine. I'm really into caffeine. And again, caffeine, you can harm yourself on caffeine, but it's, relatively safe if you talk with your doctor, of course. But it's, it's harder to harm yourself from caffeine than it is from, say, heroin. But anyway, he was taking coffee in a drip coffee maker, and then he was putting it back through the filter like 4 times, and he was drinking all of these energy drinks. And I just sensed this intense compulsion that he was like, okay, I'm sober, but I need to shove some sort of substance into my body. And you'll see people do this. It'll be LSD for 1 month, and then that becomes a problem. Then it's cocaine, then it's marijuana 24/7, then it's alcohol, and so the fact that she's not using heroin, I guess, is okay, but she seemed to exhibit actually the sort of addiction profile of someone that we would have called a polysubstance, meaning that they have a hard time living sober. It's not about a particular substance. It's about getting some substance into their body, and it's a compulsive itch that needs to be itched. And it's a desperation of trying to soothe your nerves, essentially, through any means. And marijuana and alcohol can do it. They don't do it as much as, say, heroin, but it can soothe the nerves, so to speak, and help you to avoid your trauma work. The other part, again, that I keep saying about Demi Lovato is that, at least in the documentary, there was no talk of any evidence-based trauma recovery program. She talked about an intensive week thing. That sounded really dubious to me. Anyway, yeah, so Monica agreed. I'm worried. M says, hey, Doc, I want to let you know that your other Demi videos made me realize I need to get 100% sober. I've been doing the same thing that Demi has been doing. Thank you so much. This is going to be hard. Well, M, congratulations on that. I'm glad to hear that. So what you're saying to me is that you were dancing with the devil as well, and you were trying to have your cake and eat it too. You're trying to cut back, but you were still using substances because it was hard. It's hard. Recovery is hard. But after watching the videos, you said, you know what? I need to be 100% sober. That's the only way that this is going to work, and it often is. And so good for you, Em. Keep me updated. Let me know how it's going and stay connected. Go to the meetings and get into a treatment program. Engineer your life. Get a sponsor. Get 2 sponsors. Get a therapist that specializes in addiction. Get your whole life situated and sustain it. Do not stop. Keep going for the rest of your life. The people that I know who have attained sobriety for 25 years and are just elated with their life about how wonderful their life has become with sobriety, they continue to go to meetings. Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once a week, maybe they go every day for a few weeks because there was a death in the family and they just know, oh, I better go to meetings. It's not hard. You just show up. The meetings are an hour and a half. You sit in a chair. You don't have to talk. You can just sit there and fold your arms. But usually you don't. After you get to know people, the humility of it is good. The surrender is good. The camaraderie is good. The inspiration is good. The hearing other stories is good. The connection with other sober people is good. So let me know how it goes, Em. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.